Right. Valve released a new patch with an Operation Riptide. Now, I don't usually do these all like patch rundowns, etc., but this one has some pretty significant stuff for the future of competitive Counter-Strike that I really want to talk about, actually. Like, for a start off, we'll just run through the gun changes before we get to the really big one. Spoiler, it's the dropping grenades one. So, one of the key ones I actually think is the M4A1S, which classically, for a few years, was massively out of favour. If people don't know, it used to be the other way around. If you go back to 2014, 2015, you'll actually see Happy, Forest, loads of players using the M4A1S. It was actually maybe the preferred gun. Obviously, you have the silenced element as well, even when it had less bullets from memory. Now, what they've done essentially is increase the damage it does to the body, and actually, not by like a tiny amount. The problem, I think, is this. I already thought the M4A1S was actually viable for pro play. I think for most people, you're going to want to use the M4A4 because you get the 30 bullets, because if you go for headshots, it's going to be better overall. But if you want to just do spray downs or you want to do like sneaky lurk play, I always thought the M4A1S still had its charm. It was obviously cheaper as well, which allowed it to then be picked. So the problem I have now is I actually think from playing with it a bit, it's too good. It actually reminds me of the 1.6 silencer. So the issue is, listen, everyone can use it. It's not like it's going to be unfair in that regard. But I do think it's actually maybe slightly too strong overall. And now it's almost like they've swapped the roles of the guns. Like in the past, if anything, I'm probably using this if I'm like scream to headshot, and I'm using the M4A4 just to spray people down. I think if anything, logically, it's the other way around now because it does more DPS than the M4A4. Now, the M4A4 has a slightly higher rate of fire, but I think it'll actually still be like a few people stick with the M4A4 positionally, but I think you'll see a lot of people use the M4A1S. Now, listen, it's a lot of fun to use and play with yourself, but I think it might be slightly overtuned. With that said, I don't hate it because every bloody change Valve seems to make, minus the org change, always benefits the T side, which already has cheaper weapons, stronger weapons. Now they even have the economy on their side. So being as the CT economy's in the fucking toilet and it has all sorts of problems in pro play, I like the idea we're getting a slightly better CT weapon and it's one of the cheaper rifles in that regard. It's not that far from the AK, so I like that in some sense. I think maybe that'll make it more interesting. I actually think some of the maps, Nuke's an obvious example, have gotten almost too many T rounds to be expected, so anything that makes the CT side a little bit stronger for me right now is a good thing overall. The Deagle, I actually think this change is great. They've reduced the body damage a little bit. Now, I think that's good because I do think the Deagle was overpowered. I think the price point was fine, but the problem is this. Even though generally I don't say nerf guns based on the best players, the problem is this. People like Nico do just show you that gun is fucking unbelievable. Because not only will he get their long-range headshot and just get a kill with a fucking pistol, but he is always going to hit his body shots. And so basically, if you get hit by one bullet, he's doing like half your health at that point in time. So I do think, actually up close, when people like shotgun style just spammed it and like chokes, I think it was too powerful in terms of like how much damage a body shot was doing. So I like it that it's more about shoot them in the fucking head. If you can shoot them in the head with that gun, I think it's a pretty balanced weapon overall. The dual elites, the dualies, have actually been put down to be cheaper. I actually think they might have been made a little bit too cheap. Like, I could see people using this, I don't know about pro players so much, certainly in matchmaking, etc., where people don't have good aim. Obviously, you can just spam them, can't you? If you're at medium range, you're going to get some kills with it. I think they might be a little bit too cheap because now there's a world where maybe you buy that instead of, like, you know, the force buy pistol, because, and especially if you have a couple of you, that's where pro play might be an issue, and you just get a couple of you in chokes and you just spam it if they come around. Like, it's going to be really hard if you're coming around that corner with a fucking SMG or something. Like, I think they might have made it slightly too cheap overall. That might be too much. Now, one thing that's mainly just around terminology I want to talk about is they made a change to the length of the game mode. In theory, you have the normal game mode, which they describe as max rounds 30, and then you have this new game mode, max rounds 16, which basically is just a short version of the game. Obviously, logically, forget the max rounds 16 part. What they basically mean there is first person to get 9 rounds in the game wins, and you just have 8 rounds on each half. Now, the reason I've had to just explain that like that is because it actually shows that the CSGO devs aren't old school, don't know esports, and therefore don't actually know what the terminology max rounds means. Now, a load of people out there who are also fucking plebs are going to try and gaslight me that actually max rounds 30 makes perfect sense. It means you play 30 rounds. No, you don't. You don't play 30 rounds in a game. How many fucking games go 16, 14? The concept of max rounds is this is how many rounds you play per half. So what we play in modern Counter-Strike is max rounds 15. That means you play 15 rounds per half. Therefore, the one that gets to 16 in regulation wins the game, right? In the past, we played max rounds 12 in like 2000 to, let's say, 2002. It was mainly ESWC that came along and changed it to max rounds 15. Before that, we played charges only, where only the T-side rounds counted. Or in America, they played time limit, like 20-minute time limit, and however many rounds you get overall. They even played 7v7 in America and 6v6 in Europe at times. But eventually, we got to max rounds 15. Now, basically, they described it as they've made a mode called max rounds 16. Well, that would be fucking more rounds than we currently play. That would be like best of 32, wouldn't it? Then they say, and the long version is max rounds 6. Well, that would be a fucking 60-round game, potentially, wouldn't it? So that'd be incredibly long. It would be way longer. So you've basically fucked the terminology. Now, I have noticed, if you go, it does appear that the server setting works like they say, like max rounds 30. But that's because the CSGO devs don't fucking understand the terminology in Counter-Strike. So they're the ones that did that wrong. Just because they changed it doesn't mean like they get to retcon all of history, make it right. Now, that's not a big deal. I'm just saying they have fucked up the terminology. Now, with that said, the idea of having a short version like a quickie mode, you just hop in, you have a fun little game, first one to get the 9 wins, 8 rounds a half. Economy at the moment means you're going to pretty much have guns most of the time. I will say, by the way, the economy does mean if you play like Inferno, you win the CT pistol, you get forced back on, you'll basically almost get no fucking gun rounds. You'll have to force buy a whole bunch of times and half buy down. So that will be dog shit. And in fact, that's generally my main issue, is that I feel like this is just a way of trying to avoid the fact everyone complains every bloody game seems to go 16, 14 because of the economy. But this doesn't fix that. It just makes the game shorter. It doesn't actually make the issue go away, does it? Now, then they've done some map changes, and I actually have some screenshots for you here, courtesy of mraz565 on Reddit. So on Inferno, this is a very minor one. I didn't really know what the relevance of this is. Was there a spam here or something, or something you could throw over maybe? They've just made that gate in the very middle. If you look past the orb, that's just a solid area now. That's it. So that one doesn't really fucking matter. It's the Dust 2 change. That's the bigger one before we get to the grenades. And again, same person did the screenshots. So in CT spawn, you can't look down. Look, they've blocked all this top area off. You can't look down Suicide anymore as a T and see the CTs crossing. Now, there's another angle on it. If you're in CT spawn, you also can't see the Ts up in there and see them crossing. This is what it looks like from the other side. If you push up, you can't see above where Suicide is. Now, first of all, you can just gamble as a T and jump down and use the AWP and see people slightly crossing if they're a bit delayed or coming through. And if you have 2 people jump down, you can stand on their head just like the old Suicide and actually look down. Now, I actually think that's a good thing because it means now, at least for the Ts, you're gambling something. Now, I know you're going to go, but what if, like, Simple just kills you as CT? Yeah, he does that because he's a fucking god. That's actually a disadvantageous position to be in compared to the T. That's why, if it's a Guardian or something on the other side on T, so they're going to eat you up all fucking day long. So I always hated the idea. CTs can't get to the other side without being spotted, and they usually have to use utility to stop people who are really good snipers shooting them through the door, through the gap, depending if they're fucking online cheaters. So I actually thought the fact there wasn't truly counterplay there was something that actually sort of ruined Dust 2 as a map. I've always been in favour of somehow fixing that in some sense. It's already a T-sided map and probably always will be. So I like the idea that now there's some gamble on the T-side as to what you do in that regard. Now CTs can overstack the B-side. They can get people into the lower tunnels very quickly maybe. They don't have to waste utility. If people don't know, CTs who already have the more expensive utility and the more expensive fucking economy and the game plays against them because of the fucking pistol round aspect, they basically are in a situation where everything costs more and they had to use one extra piece of util. Might be a smoke, might be a flash. Obviously Carrigan famously back in 2015 in TSM got around it by inventing where you just threw a nade and when the little smoke plume went, you jumped over, so you got to save a smoke at that point in time. Like, I've always thought it was overpowered for Ts in that regard. Interestingly, another angle is they've improved visibility, they say, from the upper tunnels into the back of the B site. Okay, that's pretty good. There were some issues in that regard. Not the end of the world, really. Then on Ancient, they fixed the spam spot in theory, like the plywood area. So hopefully that's going to address some of the issues because that had sort of broken the map a little bit. It was just like the idea only one side could do it was stupid as fuck. They've also, and this was needed, made the bomb spot area bigger, because I hated that part. Like when you execute on the site, there's people just lined up and they just wait, they just spray into that area through the smoke. So I did think that actually ruined the T side of the map. That's why I don't think it was actually fast paced very much. Now let's get to the really crazy part, which is obviously the shit with the grenades, right? Basically, you can drop grenades that you've bought. As in, you can just drop a grenade on the floor, not prime it and make it explode. You can just throw it on the floor like you would a pistol or a gun or a bomb, and your teammate can pick it up. Now, people have suggested this over the years many, many times. The problem is this. I agree, basically, with MSL that it ruins certain fundamental concepts of how the utility work, and that it actually decreases the strategic elements of the game. You can try some more gimmick things, but I'm talking about the strategy of understanding what are they doing, what can I infer from that, what does that mean I've got left, do I have an extra piece of you? Like, you can't use that in the same way. And so, first of all, I agree with MSL. I think this should only be possible to drop these things during freeze time. So you can do it to drop your teammates some nades and make the economy flat. That's fair enough, and spread the money out, but you can't do any of the shit that people can do now, where you can do stuff like you can have a whole load of nades and flashes and smokes for the guy who's going to fake A on Mirage on T side, and then you guys can just pop into window and into the fucking B site with 4 people, when it looked like it was the smokes and flashes that at least 2 or 3 people are coming here. I don't like that, because essentially it fucks up the tactical element. You can't count utility in the same way. That was an advantage to the smartest in-game leaders and the teams with the best comms. You can't, as a result, by the way, deduce based on some of the util how many might be attacking and make an appropriate read. You just have to gamble and just wait and see. So the CTs who are already in a bad position in the game right now are on the back fucking foot again. You can't in theory, you can just drop a bunch of utils somewhere, go off and fight, and then your teammate can pick it up if you die. So as a result, you get this little like util stash that you hide somewhere. Maybe you put it on like Vietnam, the fucking underpass area on Inferno, when you're going to rotate between the 2 sites like the T's do all the time. Now, what I don't like about that again is it rewards basically sloppy play. Like, I always liked the fact that if you had a grenade and the smokes and the flashes, and you're like a middle of the pack player, if you don't use them and you get into a fight and you die, you just die with them and it costs you from the economy and your team gets nothing from that utility. But if you had saved some of it and didn't just waste it, throwing it pointlessly like even some pros do, now you're going to look extra shrewd that you got extra flash and extra smoke in some late round execute. It's actually why, classically, I've noticed a lot of the really great in-game leaders, they tend to show up in a post plant or a retake with 1 extra flash or 1 extra smoke when everyone else would have thrown it, and they use that to their advantage because maybe they're not as skilled as players, but they know the value of utility in that scenario. So the problem I also think as well is this. I think it now punishes teams that had a load of players who knew loads of smoke and flash lineups. Because now, in theory, you can just have 1 or 2 guys who know them all, and you just throw them the util all the time. Like, there was an example people gave, and everyone was guffawed, like, it didn't even work, because I think, no, it's what's possible. Where Asilian, basically, from Apex, was just solo faking the entire A site as his team went out the B apartments. Now, they didn't do it entirely correctly, and the rotation didn't happen. Like, if anything, it's almost like the CTs were too shit to actually do the proper call, or they were prepared for this. Because I think of like a team like Virtus Pro. One thing I was always very impressed is they had a few players who could do a whole bunch of the smokes and had put in the hours. Meanwhile, some of the other teams, like some of the top Swedish teams, they had like 1 player or 2 players who knew a whole bunch of the interesting ones. Well, if that player's dead and you're now going to attack that site, he can't do that amazing smoke for you. He doesn't have the line. But tell you what, if you, in theory, you could just bring another guy and go, well, I've got a smoke and a flash and I can't do it, but you can take it. And see what I mean? What if that player that can do the smokes didn't have the util before? It was another element of the game overall strategically. Now, the one thing I'll say at the end here is, I do think there's something very conspicuous and fucking missing right now, which is, where's the economy change? The economy is breaking the game. If you want to see an example of it, go watch the 3rd map between NIP and G2 in the upper bracket in the Blast. It would have been Group B rather. Because in this game, G2 on the CT side are in the nightmare scenario. Just look how long it takes them to get full gun rounds and how many rounds they're just full up saving. And NIP's just winning 3 rounds over and over and over because they get punished for winning pistol, losing after that and having bought, and then the C's have all these cheap buys. Like, I think basically this is ruining the game. I think it is actually spoiling Counter-Strike right now and taking away a lot of the parity between the sides based on skill, strategic play. The game is, you're playing not just against the T's, you're now playing against the fucking economy as well. Now, the one thing I'll say is this. I obviously am not a big fan of making massive changes like this right before the major. Like, we're about to go into the last RMR that's going to qualify people. So people are going to qualify in a totally radically different meta, potentially. I also think, generally, why can't we have major meta changes after a major? So then we've got all this time to get into the game, and then we can come to the next major, and then after that you can make more changes. They always do it slapdash like this. So like, that's why Vertigo ended up changing entirely, potentially, who won Starlight de Berlin. If you go back to 2014, you have fucking Overpass and Cobblestone, never before seen, broken maps at the time. They just get introduced with a randomizer which forces them into pro play because everyone didn't ban them all. I mean, this is just silly stuff. You want the major to have a high competitive integrity. You want it to have a consistency that people have been practicing and playing and qualifying on a similar kind of meta, and then they play at the major and show off how good they are overall. Who knows what these changes are going to have in terms of effect? Now, I already know what people are going to say, because they always do. They're going to go, but change is good, and there might be new things possible, and like, let's adapt. And then basically, like, imagine some of the things people could do. Yeah, imagine how I've just explained how it fundamentally makes the game less of a chess match, less of a thing where you can calculate values and figure things out and use your brain overall, and more gimmicky, more silly things that go on that basically you can't possibly necessarily guess at. Now CTs will have to make crazy information plays when they see smokes and flashes coming over and potentially just get fragged for free as they're stepping out of a site. How's that good? And then you're going to say, like, on CT side, well, they could use it on CT side. CT counter utility is not going to be as OP overall, in my opinion. Certain sites you might use just stack up on it and keep smoking over and over and over. Like, maybe we can on Inferno, maybe we go back to the meta where you just can't go B until the very end of the fucking round, like in the Fnatic LDLC end of 2014 heyday, which, by the way, was certainly good for brilliant teams playing TT side, but it ruined a lot of the T side innovation, I have to say. But as usual, there's always a person out there, their whole vibe's like, change it, change anything, change stuff, make it crazy. Yeah, that's because losers always want to flip the board. They always want to nerf what makes the other people better than them, or make it easier for everyone, like Valve's done repeatedly, like showing things like the bomb on the fucking radar, so now teams that come amazingly don't get an advantage. Like, there's all sorts of silly things, or you can see what your teammate can see on the radar in terms of the fucking T's. Like, for some reason, there will always be people who just think change and progress are just universally good. That's why you get tricked by politics, don't you? That's why you voted for a certain fucking American president in the 2000s who promised change and progress. And what was it? Oh, a bunch of fucking business as usual and just the illusion of change. It wasn't better. So if there's a reason why these things are better, and applications, sure, cool, I'll enjoy it as well. But just automatically, you don't just screw and tinker with key elements of the game, fundamental principles, just because, like, well, it makes it fresh, doesn't it? I don't need Counter-Strike to be fresh. I don't need you to change fucking the NFL or soccer to make them better sports. They were better sports. If anything, they've been nerfed by the fucking rules. Now Neymar just rolls on the ground all the time trying to get a free kick instead of just bouncing off people and keeping on his fucking feet and trying to score a goal, you know, the honest way. Now motherfuckers in the NFL just score running touchdowns all day long as a running back because they can't just get fucking smashed in the head by a massive linebacker just straight up the middle when they come out, right? Wide receivers are just on a fucking autobahn straight to the end zone. So now everyone just breaks all the fucking offensive records. Why is that good? Like, you might say for a safety reason. Well, in Counter-Strike, we don't need safety reasons, do we? We play the game virtually, therefore we don't need to do any gimmicky shit.
What's up, everybody? I'm Uber from the Overwatch League, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. That's right, the esports historian lives right here. And if you're seeing this message, you're probably already blocked on Twitter. Unlucky, really.
This video was kindly supported by Kris with a K, Lager15, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Skaparen, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Bot Pounder 420, Kris, ErikHillestad, Hinders, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and special thanks go out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs? Do you want teasers? Who's going to be the guests on my next interviews? Do you want to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.